What's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode of our game development. As you can see, we have our UI system now. So if you look above that, we have a health bar. We have a bar that was in charge of oxygen we have, and it's like decreasing right now. And to the right, we have a bar that shows the items that the player have. And also our player can interact with our environment. If we go here and press E, we can read the stuff on this control panel. And if we go here, and there's a pop-up that tells us to press E. And if we press E here, we collect stuff. And also, we have an oxygen bar. So it's warning us we have low oxygen. So if I press X right now, you can see we have one less oxygen tank. We have like full oxygen amount right now. And also, if you press tab, we have a crafting table. So in our game, the elements are the basic items, are the basic materials that you can collect, where you can craft different stuff using those materials. So if I press here, we craft some pistol ammos. If we press here, we can craft some oxygen tank or some health syringes. One more thing that I made is how the player deals with damage. So as you can see, once I get hurt, then we have a red screen effect, and also this red stuff that shows where the damage is coming from. And also the screen shakes when there's a damage from the player, which I think is pretty cool. And also when the health is low, we have a low health warning flashing here, tell us how low our health is. All the systems, all the features that I mentioned before are made upon a bunch of systems that I made. So one system is the system that was in charge of the oxygen bar, how much oxygen the player have, and another one is the system that was in charge of the health of the player, and one more system is that one that was in charge of the inventory our player have, how much items that it keeps track of all the items the player have, and also controls the behavior when the player is crafting stuff. And also one more system is the system that calculates where the damage is coming from, and gives an UI that shows the player where the damage is coming from. So in the following part of the video, I will explain how those systems work one by one to you. Let's start with the health bar system. So first of all, we have the script that was called player health that was attached to player, and you can see what it does is that so once we detect the key Z, we use a health syringe, and this one increases health. And also when the player is hit by a bullet, then it basically decreases the health of the player, depends on what kind of bullet it has been hit. And also this is the numerator for the flame that was controlling how the player deals with damage when it's affected by flame. And also we can see that when the health is below 0, we start a coroutine called die, which controls the behavior of death of the player. So it basically instantiates the ragdoll that was the ragdoll of the player, and it deleted the current player. So it just leave a dead player ragdoll just floating around in space. But this one is not connected to the health bar that we see in the UI system. So how does it connect to the health bar? So we have a script called status bar that was connected to the health bar that was attached to the health bar in our UI, and basically those lines of code deals with the health bar and also the oxygen bar. So basically it sets the health bar the max value to the max value in the player health script, and also the current value to the current health in the script of the player health. And I use a lerp function here to make the changing health more smooth instead of just abruptly changing from one value to another, which looks better inside the UI. Now let's take a look at the inventory system. So for our inventory system, we have something that keeps a track of all the inventory we have, all the items that we have, and also this crafting table that you can see is moving along with the mouse to create this very cool menu effect. So how do I achieve this? We have a script called inventory, and what it does is that it keeping track of all the items that the player have and making it into a public field. So basically, if we press tab, then we can show this. We can pause the game and also show the item table. And also this one DevLog the cursor, so you can move the cursor around and click on the item that you want to create. So those are the separate functions when you press different buttons, and basically it creates something and it deletes some other items based on what you're crafting right now. And one thing that you might notice is that when you click on one of the buttons here, you can have a track on what's decreasing and what's increasing. So if I press this one, the oxygen tank, it takes one iron and one oxygen to make, then you can see that we have one less iron and one less oxygen and one more oxygen tank. So how do I achieve this function? So basically it's kind of dumb, but I check whether the variable is still the same variable frame, and if the variable changes, I just call this function where I compute the difference, like how much the value has changed, and display it in the drop down that you see before in the game UI. It's not like 100% efficient, but it's like the most easy way that I can think of. And also this function controls how the inventory table, the crafting table, move alongside with our mouse. So you can basically, I convert the position of the mouse on the screen to the rotation of the inventory table UI. So you can see this is basically the converting, and I set the usual angle to the newly converted angles from our mouse position. And that's basically all for the inventory system. Another system is the pop-up, the text pop-up that you saw when we approach something and want to read something on this control panel. So how do I achieve that? So basically we have a script called text pop-up, and what it does is that, so we have a collider on this object, on the text pop-up object, and once a player enter the trigger, and we have a trigger on this object, and once the player enters the trigger, and when it's inside the trigger, and at the same time it press the button E, the key E, then we have a function called read from file. It calls a function called read from file. So what does this function read from file do? So basically what it does is that it pauses the game, and it reads some file to this text array from this file path where you can enter in this object. So this file is currently stored on my laptop, but we can change it to any place we want inside the game. So after it reads the text into the text array, it basically we move all the text in the text array to the text mesh pro text that was attached to the UI system. So basically all the text in the text array pop up on your screen. So that's how I achieve the reading function. And also you will notice that when you approach this thing and you press E, you will collect some objects, and also some objects on this shelf will be deleted. So this is actually pretty similar from our text pop-up. So this is a script called collect pop-up. And what it does is still use a trigger. So when the player is inside the trigger and the player press E at the same time, then it calls a function called collect items. And in this function called collect item, what it does is that it first destroys all the items on the shelf that you want to collect, and also it adds the item that you want to add to your inventory. So that's actually quite easy to achieve. Now let's take a look at the script that was responsible for the damage, like the UI where it tells the player where the damage is coming from. This is actually the hard part because the rotation system in Unity is kind of hard to understand. So we have this script called check collection collision that was attached to the player. And what it does is that it detects collision from the player, and so we have a contact point here, and the direction of the collision is basically where a vector from the contact point to where the player is. Then I calculate the angle of this vector horizontally to give a horizontal angle that indicates where the damage is from, and I call this angle rotation. And in another script that was in our UI system, which is called status bar, so her rotate is the transform of the herd effect that is in the UI system. So I just use this line of code to change the rotation of the herd effect to this rotation. So this one gives us so this one rotates at the herd effect at where the player gets its damage, and it works really well. Another thing I want to talk about is the oxygen system. So the oxygen system follows the same logic as the player health system. So what it does is that so the oxygen is decreasing on a timely basis. So basically it's reducing its volume as time increases. And once the player used an oxygen tank, then we got 150 more oxygen. So this is equivalent to 50 seconds of oxygen left. And as you might see before in this player, in this status bar script, we have those lines of code that controls how the oxygen bar goes according to the value it returns from the script called oxygen that was attached to the player. So that's all for today's content. We have a new UI system now, and we still need more game map and probably more enemies and more game mechanics. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.